Well, welcome again to the Northborough Church of Christ YouTube channel. And we're thankful you're here. We're thankful that you've logged on again. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel. We will be doing other videos as well as this channel evolves. And hopefully we can start doing some kid-friendly videos talking about some biblical characters in the future. So look forward to that. And through the help of Adam, we've been able to do some other things with the VBS video and things like that. So welcome again. And today we end our short abbreviated sermon series on the wise and foolish person. And this is part 2, and this is the final sermon on this topic. Imagine a society that has lost its integrity, its moral principles, a society known for honesty and uprightness, becoming more irresponsible with truth and redefining what is right with its own eyes. A society that prides itself on education and knowledge, diversity of thought and ideas, no longer willing to receive instruction from an opposing view, nor recognizing that they could be wrong and subject to an ultimate authority. A society filled with consciously blind and naked people, seared in its own conscience as with a branding iron. A society deaf to the voices of its people, fake news, false narratives, numb hearts, two-parent homes full of orphans. You say, well, how can that be? Well, you can have a child living in the home with both of their parents and they still have no guidance. They've been orphaned with regard to wisdom of God. They've been orphaned with regard to those parents teaching and training them up in the way of righteousness. They almost get treated as like a chia pet. Feed it and water it, sit back and just watch it grow. No. Lives that don't matter. Can you see the eventual decay, the insidious decline of this society? How foolish it would be for a nation, a society, a family, an individual to no longer be filled with integrity, no longer willing to receive instruction, and filled with such animus towards one another that we sit down and eat a meal after we've thrown our brother into a dry well. Brothers and sisters, a wise man holds on to his integrity, while a foolish person lets go of it. A wise person will receive instruction, while a foolish person will have none of it. They'd rather hear their own wisdom. And a wise person fights against animosity, fights against having ill will towards someone, while a foolish person doesn't mind. They thrive even on animosity. They thrive on the idea of getting revenge. They thrive on the idea of acting out their animosity against that individual, that person, that nation, that country. We'd like to look at, and I'd like to look at, comparisons of the wise and foolish person in Job and his wife, in Jedediah, Solomon, and Joseph and his brothers. In the story of Job, at least the beginning of Job, we find him a righteous and upright man in Job chapter 1. And we see him struggling a little bit. He never sinned with his lips, the Bible teaches us, as far as the first part of his life that is recorded, that we see the turmoil and trial that Satan brought upon Job. It says that he clung to his integrity. But his wife, what did his wife say? See, she had let go of her integrity in what she said to Job. You think about Solomon, you think about Jedediah, and what he said in Ecclesiastes as he's looking back on his life. It makes me wonder if he didn't think of himself. And here we have a perfect example of someone who is so tremendously wise, being foolish. He was foolish in a sense that he allowed himself to be pulled away from God. He no longer received instruction. And what did he ask for when he first became king? Instruction, wisdom from God. And that can happen to us as well. And then finally, Joseph and his brothers. We see Joseph showing extreme wisdom, showing that he was favored of God. He could have exacted revenge on his brothers when they were bowing to him as his dreams foretold, but he didn't. He was a man of wisdom. So Job chapter 1, let's start reading. In verse 1, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless, upright, fearing God and turning away from evil. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. His possessions also were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. And that man was the greatest of all the men of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the days of feasting had completed their cycle, Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "Perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. And then it talks about this scenario where the sons of men were presenting themselves before God, and Satan was also presenting himself before God. And God says, "Have you considered my servant Job?" In verse 8. "For there was no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil." And we know that the Psalms and the Proverbs say that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Job was a wise man. He feared the Lord. And Satan says, "Does Job fear you for nothing?" Basically, look at all that he has. Take all this stuff away, and he'll curse you. But Satan was wrong, and God was right. And it says that Satan came and took all of these things away. He took his cattle away and his herds, and took his sons and daughters away. They were killed. Even his servants was taken away from him, and still Job did not curse God. He did not let go of his integrity. He did not let go of what was right, even though he was seeing and experiencing tremendous trial, tremendous loss. In verse 13, "Now on the day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, 'The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabeans attacked and took them. They also slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you.' While he was still speaking, another also came and said, 'The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you.' And then while he was still speaking, another also came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 bands and made a raid on the camels and took them and slew them, the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another also came and said, "Your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they died, and I alone have escaped to tell you." And this is what Job says in verse 20. "Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell to the ground and worshiped." Now picture this. You're wealthy. God has blessed you so tremendously, and you know it. You're an upright person, blameless, better than all the people of your neighborhood. And all of those things get taken away. Would you bow down and worship God? He says in verse 21, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." That's not easy. We quickly read through all that Job lost and say, well, of course, blessed be the name of the Lord. No. It says he tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground. He was upset. He was sad. He had lost it all. Job held on to his integrity. It reminds me of Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, and sometimes verse 13 gets misused, and we want to straighten that out today. It reminds me, Job's story reminds me of these verses. In verse 10, "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at last you have revived your concern for me." Paul is encouraging the Philippians, look, I know you're concerned about me. I rejoice. "You were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me." Verse 13 is about being content. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, because I can be content with an abundance or with want, with more or with less. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Let's see that in Job. I see that, and he didn't let go of his integrity because he had lost all of these things. Because who did he still have? He had God. He believed that God did not owe him good. God has made tremendous promises to us, right? Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 6 that if we seek his kingdom and his righteousness, all of these things? What we need will be added on to us. Brothers and sisters, sometimes we get anxious, not because of our needs, but because of our wants. And Job says, I believe that God doesn't owe me good. God is good, but he doesn't owe me good. Have we become entitled? Job held on to his integrity. How? How did he do? He believed that God did not owe him good. He knew who God was. He knew who God was. It says Job feared the Lord. You can't fear the Lord unless you have a good idea of who he is. In Proverbs 1 and verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. In verse 20 and 22, we already talked about it in Job chapter 1, but let's read it again. He said, naked I have come from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He knew that God didn't know him good. God was good, but he didn't know him good. And he knew who God was. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And through all this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God. Wow. In Job 13:15, Job is talking about his despair and his situation, and he's talking about how he wants to have a conversation with God about what's going on. And he says, though he slay me, still I will hope in him. Job held on to his integrity because his hope wasn't in his stuff. His hope was in God. Though he slay me, yet I will hope in God. I will hope in him. Is that your hope, brothers and sisters, friends? Is that your hope? God? I pray that it is. Job held on to his integrity. He was a wise man. And brothers and sisters, if we want to be wise, when things get tough, when things go wrong, when things don't go according to plan, what are we going to do? Are we going to let go of our integrity, or are we going to hold on to it as a wise person would? Or are we going to be like Job's wife? In chapter 2, everything was taken away from Job except his wife and his health. And in Job chapter 2, we see that even his health was taken away from him. See, Job's wife withdrew her integrity. In Job chapter 2, starting in verse 9, then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die. Now, I don't want to be too hard on his wife. See, she had lost her children too. She had lost wealth too. She had lost all of these things as well. But one thing she didn't have that Job did was integrity in that moment. It was hard for her. I imagine it. And then her husband, he's in despair. He's covered in boils. And while he is covered in boils, her husband is covered in boils. She was boiling over. Curse God and die. I have a feeling that she was angry about what was going on. I would be, wouldn't you? Proverbs 19 and verse 3 says this: the foolishness of man ruins his way, and his heart rages against the Lord. That word rages, you could also say boils against the Lord. And I believe that she is raging against God in her heart because she doesn't understand who the real cause of the situation is. And brothers and sisters, we can do the same thing if we're not wise. We can let go of our integrity. We can withdraw our integrity. In those moments of trial and testing, we let go of it. We speak things that are so foolish. What a foolish thing to say. Curse God and die? Who was behind this attack? Who was behind this trial? Satan. God knew Job's response. God knew that Job would respond the way he did. He knew the character of Job. He knew that Job was a man of integrity. and Satan didn't. See, Satan doesn't know everything about you. Satan doesn't know how you are going to respond or whether or not you're going to respond in a positive or negative way. He doesn't know everything. And if we're going to be wise, we need to hold on to our integrity. We cannot be as Job's wife was. She let go of it. In a hard and trying, I can't even describe how hard and what her feelings must have been. But curse God and die? How foolish. She allowed Satan to win. Job's wife withdrew her integrity. We need to be wise people, not foolish. Proverbs chapter 10, she withdrew her integrity by speaking as a foolish person speaks. Curse God and die, she said. A foolish person speaks this way. In Proverbs 10, verse 14, wise men store up knowledge, but with the mouth of the foolish, ruin is at hand. Also in 15 and verse 2, Proverbs 15 and verse 2, the tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable, but the mouth of fools spouts folly. She withdrew her integrity by speaking as a foolish person speaks. She withdrew her integrity because she was boiling over, and we already read the Proverb 19 and verse 3. And she also withdrew her integrity because she allowed Satan to win. Job is a wonderful story of wisdom and some foolishness. But in the end, we see what God did for Job. And we also see the wisdom in Job in the fact that when God confronted him, he put his hand over his mouth. He understood his place and God's place. And God restored him. God gave him more than he had. Be like Job. And be like Jedediah. Be like Solomon. Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived, save Jesus. And we find his story in 1 Kings chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11, talking about a wise and foolish man. We can see the wisest men display foolishness at times, and we see that in 1 Kings chapter 3. 1 Kings chapter 3. We'll start there. Then Solomon formed a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his own house, the house of the Lord, and the wall around Jerusalem. The people were still sacrificing on the high places because there was no house built for the name of the Lord until those days. Now Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except the sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. The king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. In Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night, and God asked, "Ask what you wish me to give you." Ask what you wish me to give you. And this is what Solomon said. "You have shown great loving kindness to your servant David, my father, according as he walked before you in truth, and righteousness and uprightness of heart toward you. And you have reserved for him this great loving kindness, that you have given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, yet I am but a little child. I do not know how to go or come in. Your servant is in the midst of your people which you have chosen, a great people who are too many to be numbered or counted. So give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, to discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours. And it says it was pleasing in the sight of the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. See, Solomon was wise and foolish. And here we see his wisdom in the fact that he was wise enough to know he lacked wisdom. Solomon was wise enough to know that he was like a child. He lacked wisdom. In 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 13, it says that God had also given him something that he didn't ask for, which was riches and wealth. Now think about this. Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, he's now asking for wisdom. He's willing and wanting to receive instruction from God. God, I need your help. He was wise enough to realize he wasn't wise enough. And brothers and sisters, I pray that that is who we are. We are wise enough to know that we're not wise enough. And we ask God for wisdom, just like James tells us to in James chapter 1. Jedediah was wise. He was wise because he knew he lacked wisdom, and he asked God for it. He asked for a discerning heart to discern between good and evil, and we need the same. In Ecclesiastes 4, though, Solomon, at the end of his life, wrote Ecclesiastes, and I just want to pay attention to one verse. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 13. And it just makes me wonder, did Solomon write this about himself? In verse 13, a poor yet wise lad is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to receive instruction. When Solomon first became king, God, I need your instruction. I ask for wisdom, a discerning heart. And we know as he grows older, this rich and wealthy king writes in Ecclesiastes 4, it's better to be a poor yet wise lad than a king who is old and foolish, who no longer knows how to receive instruction. I wonder. He's looking back on his life and all of these women who have taken his heart and caused him and moved him and encouraged him to make some awful decisions. We see even Nehemiah records it. When he's looking at the people and how they've turned to women who are foreign women, and he says, and he uses Solomon as an example. He says, even Solomon was made to sin. We see the foolishness in Solomon. And he was a wise man. Jedediah, I'm loved of the Lord. But he made some mistakes. He made some foolish decisions. In 1 Kings chapter 11, now let's go there. In 1 Kings chapter 11, starting in verse 1. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. Solomon held fast to these in love. See, as he got older, I believe that he knew what God's instructions were, but he didn't want to hear it. Solomon decided that what was right in his own eyes was better. You know any know-it-alls? Maybe you're the know-it-all, right? Maybe I am. Are you willing to receive instruction? Some folks, I've heard this before, the mindset and the heart set is, well, who are you to try and witness to me? No, I'm educated. I'm successful financially. I am socially accepted. Who are you? You're not educated. You're not this. You're not that. How dare you try to witness to me? See, they don't want to receive instruction. They're like that old king who can't receive instruction, can't receive the warning because of this, because of that, because of whatever it is. Foolish. Solomon, in his old age, was foolish. He was wise enough to know he lacked wisdom. And I wonder if he wasn't talking about himself in Ecclesiastes 4 and verse 13. I would like to draw your attention to Titus chapter 2. Because we can look at Solomon and say, yes, wow, he was wise enough to know he lacked wisdom. But then he was also foolish in a sense that he stopped receiving the commands of God in his heart. God had already told them, do not go and marry foreign wives because they will draw your heart away from me and towards false gods. He stopped receiving that command. But brothers and sisters, I want to talk about both sides of teaching and receiving. And Titus talks about that. Paul tells Titus in Titus chapter 2 this. Verse 1, but as for you, speak the things which are fitting for sound doctrine. Older men are to be temperate, dignified, sensible, sound in faith, in love, and perseverance. Brother, are you older in the church? Are you an older man? Be an example to the younger men. Are you still willing to be taught, and are you willing to teach the younger generation? Brother, that is for us. That is an instruction from the inspired apostle, Paul. Are we willing to receive that instruction? Maybe you're not willing to receive it from me because I'm just a young guy and I don't know. I don't have enough gray hair, right? Older men are to be temperate. That's you if you're an older man in the church. Temperate, dignified, sensible, sound in faith, in love, in perseverance. You know, you've been through some stuff. Older women, ladies, sisters who are older, likewise, are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good. Women can't teach? Well, yes, you can. There it is. Teaching what is good, so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sensible, pure, workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the word of God will not be dishonored. You say, well, we're going back to the 50s. No. We're going to heaven. Older men, older women, are you willing to be taught? And in turn, are you willing to teach the younger generation? We can't leave it up to the preacher or to the leaders. It's all of us, brothers and sisters. And young people, when the older ones reach out, because I know they are, when the older ladies and the older men reach out to you, are you willing to be taught? When a godly man or a godly older woman comes to you, are you willing to listen? Or have you already made up your mind that you know more than them? I've read all of the Psychology Today books. I've read all the rearing children books. I've read Dobson. I've read this. I've read that. I don't need your help. So we look at Solomon and say, wow, how foolish. And let's look at ourselves for a moment. We have godly people in our midst and we don't talk to them. And then we want to look at Joseph really quickly, because I know I'm long-winded today. Joseph and his brothers, really quickly. If you go to Genesis 37, you could read the story. And I just want to talk about Joseph being privileged, because it's a word that I hear lately. He was privileged. Yes, he was. He was privileged. His father, Jacob, was foolish in that way. He favored Joseph. So Joseph was privileged. Yes, he was. But I'd like to talk about Joseph's story just for a second, because I think as Christians and just as humanity as a whole, we look at somebody and where they are in life. You know, they've financially succeeded. They're in a good place, right, socially. And we look at that and say, well, they must have had it handed to them. And we don't see the struggle. We don't see the long nights. We don't see the restlessness. We don't see the prayer on their knees time and year after year. We don't see the going into debt possibly. We don't see the doors that have been slammed in their faces. All we see is, wow, look at where they are. They must have had it handed to them. Not necessarily. And we look at the story in Joseph and we see, wow, he was the prince of Egypt. But we forget sometimes that he was sold as a slave by his own brothers. We forget that he spent 2 years in prison for something that he didn't do. Oh yeah, where's the Innocence Project in his day? We forget that he told the cupbearer what was going to happen to him and asked him to remember him, and the cupbearer forgot. See, we forget about all that. We forget the struggle. In Proverbs 29, verses 9 and 11. When a wise man has a controversy with a foolish man, the foolish man either rages or laughs, and there is no rest. See, brothers and sisters, we should be open to hearing other people's opinions, even if they're different from ours, right? And that's part of our issue today in society. We don't want to listen. We've already got our minds made up. We refuse instruction. And so you try to reason with somebody so that we can see, bring both sides to the table and have an open and honest discussion about it and see if we can come to some resolution. But what happens with a foolish person? When a wise man has a controversy with a foolish man, the foolish man either rages, which is what we see today. People are raging. They're out of control. Not everybody, but some are. We see their foolishness. And you come and bring the gospel sometimes. That's what happens, right? They either rage or they laugh. With some folks, we can't reason with them. They already have in their minds what the truth is. And you try to bring another angle, another facet of the diamond, they rage and laugh. I pray that that's not us. As Christians, we need to hold on to our integrity. We need to be willing to receive instruction, even if we don't agree. We need to be willing to listen and learn. We can't be like Joseph's brothers. His brothers were filled with anger and jealousy. They were going to slay their Savior. If you read through the book of Genesis and Joseph's story, what did he end up becoming? He ended up becoming second in command in Egypt. And where was all the food? Egypt. And they were going to be willing. They were willing to kill the very one who was going to eventually save their lives because of their anger and their jealousy. Proverbs 27 is one of my favorite proverbs. And if you're in 29, just go back a couple chapters, and this is what it says in verses 3 and 4 about jealousy. A stone is heavy and the sand weighty, but the provocation of a fool is heavier than them both. You want to provoke a fool? It's going to be heavy. But the provocation of a fool is heavier than both of them. Wrath is fierce, and anger is a flood. But who can stand before jealousy? Is that you? Is that describing you? Anger and wrath, jealous. A fool who's been provoked. Joseph's brothers exhibited what Solomon wrote in Proverbs 27. They allowed their anger and their jealousy to get the best of them. They were fools. They were fools. In Ecclesiastes chapter 7, and we'll end. Do not be eager in your heart to be angry, for anger resides in the bosom of fools. We go fast forward to the end of Joseph's story. Joseph saved his brothers, his whole family. Joseph in Genesis chapter 50, after Jacob has died, and his brothers are worried now because they don't know what Joseph is going to do, and rightfully so after what they've put him through. In chapter 50 and verse 15, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him?" So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father charged before he died, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.' And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, 'Behold, we are your servants.' But Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place?'" Wow. Joseph, looking back through all those years, seeing the fear of his brothers, knowing that he could have exacted revenge, he could have been angry with them, says, "Am I in God's place?" See, they were, weren't they? They were judge and jury. They were willing to kill their brother, throw him into a dry well, and then sit down and eat a meal. What animus inside of them. What ill will towards their own brother, their own blood. And here's Joseph having an opportunity to do the same. Am I in the place of God? What wisdom. What temperance. As for you, verse 20, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. Joseph held on to his integrity. He was willing to receive instruction. He knew, I'm not God. And he wasn't allowing animosity and anger and jealousy to get the best of him. And brothers and sisters, if we want to be wise, we have to be people who hold on to our integrity like Job did. We want to be people who still receive instruction like King Solomon was willing and desiring when he was young. We have to be people who let go of animosity, ill will, anger, jealousy. We have to let go of those things. May we be people who look like Jesus to our neighborhoods, who look like Jesus to our families, who walk in integrity, who receive instruction and are willing to share that instruction. And people who live with love in our hearts, not anger, not bitterness, not jealousy, not as a fool would, but as a wise person. God bless you. I pray that you are encouraged to walk in wisdom, and that this two-part series has been an encouragement and a challenge to you. God bless you. Until we see you again, Lord willing, take care.